The debate over the future of Gaza entered a sharper, more urgent phase today as Egypt issued one of its strongest public warnings yet. Speaking from the Doha Forum in Qatar, Egypt's Foreign Minister Badr Abdelatty delivered a message that resonated across regional capitals, humanitarian agencies and diplomatic circles. The window for stabilising Gaza is rapidly closing, and the international community must act before the situation becomes unmanageable. His remarks delivered to an audience of policymakers and global observers. As for the International Stabilisation Force, we need to deploy this force as soon as possible on the ground, because one party, which is Israel, is every day violating the ceasefire and claiming that the other side is the one who is violating. So we need monitors. We need international forces to be deployed alongside what's so-called the yellow line in order to verify and to monitor the upholding of the ceasefire. The Israelis are closing the Rafah crossing from Gaza side, and we are insisting, and this is a red line for us, that the Rafah crossing will not be a gate for displacement or for putting people out of their homeland. There is no ethical or moral justification to displace the Palestinians. This is their homeland, and they should be there.
For displacement or for putting people out of their homeland. There is no ethical or moral justification to displace the Palestinians. It's their homeland and they should be there.
Underscored Cairo's growing frustration with what it sees as a dangerous drift away from the commitments outlined in the current ceasefire framework. Abdelatty called for the deployment of an international stabilisation and monitoring force as soon as possible, framing it as not only a technical requirement but the only viable mechanism to prevent a fragile ceasefire from collapsing completely. He warned that without an impartial and credible structure on the ground, accusations between Israel and Palestinian factions will continue to spiral, further eroding trust and igniting new rounds of violence. In his words, we need to deploy this force as soon as possible on the ground, because one party, which is Israel, is every day violating the ceasefire and claiming that the other side is the one who is violating. His reference to daily violations was a direct critique of what Egypt views as an unequal flow of claims and counterclaims, making it impossible to verify facts without an independent authority present. Throughout his address, the minister emphasised that the International Stabilisation Force must operate along what he referred to as the so-called yellow line, a boundary that has taken on new significance since the temporary ceasefire agreements. The yellow line is where both sides accuse the other of breaches and where oversight is currently weakest. Abdelatty argued that positioning monitors along this line would allow the international community to observe ceasefire compliance in real time, reduce misinformation, and establish accountability. He connected this to a broader objective, restoring diplomatic momentum in a conflict now overshadowed by intense political distrust. Egypt's urgency is rooted not only in the deteriorating humanitarian situation inside Gaza, but also in Cairo's own national interests. For months, Egypt has positioned itself as a mediator capable of bridging gaps between Israeli authorities, Palestinian factions, and international stakeholders. Yet Egypt also shares a border with Gaza, and the conflict's spillover effects, ranging from refugee flows to security challenges, place immense pressure on Egyptian policymakers. Abdelatty's comments reflected growing concern that without concrete steps, the situation could escalate in ways that Egypt considers both unacceptable and strategically destabilizing. This became clearer when he turned to the issue of the Rafah crossing, a point of friction that remains central to Egypt's position. His tone sharpened as he addressed Israeli restrictions on the Gaza side of the crossing, and he made Egypt's red lines unmistakably clear. He stated, "The Israelis are closing the Rafah crossing from Gaza side, and we are insisting, and this is a red line for us, that the Rafah crossing will not be a gate for displacement or for putting people out of their homeland." His language was firm, emphasizing that Egypt will not allow its territory or its infrastructure to be used in any scenario that facilitates or legitimizes mass displacement. For Cairo, this stance is not merely political. It is deeply tied to regional history, to humanitarian principles, and to fears that any forced movement of Palestinians into Egypt would alter demographic balances, trigger regional instability, and undermine Palestinian claims to their own land. Abdelatty was explicit when he said there is no ethical or moral justification to displace the Palestinians. This is their homeland and they should be there. His message was not only directed at Israel, but at international actors who may view displacement as a temporary or emergency measure. Egypt's leadership has repeatedly insisted that the protection of Palestinian territorial continuity is essential for any sustainable agreement. The Doha Forum audience listened as Abdelatty linked these issues to the broader collapse of trust between negotiating parties. In his view, each delay in implementing the second phase of the ceasefire deal creates new political obstacles. Egypt believes that the credibility of the peace process depends heavily on visible, enforceable mechanisms rather than verbal commitments. According to Cairo, without boots on the ground, monitors, observers, and an enforcement architecture, the region risks sliding back into cycles of accusation and retaliation. Diplomats in attendance noted that Egypt's positions reflect a wider frustration shared among several Arab states who believe current negotiations are too focused on managing immediate crises and not enough on creating the conditions for long-term stability. For Egypt, the stabilisation force is not merely a crisis tool, it is part of a strategic architecture, a transitional mechanism that can prevent future escalations by providing independent oversight. This, in Egypt's view, would also reduce pressure on regional states who have long carried the burden of humanitarian fallout. The foreign minister's remarks also came at a time when international attention has begun to shift away from the Gaza crisis, with competing global developments crowding the diplomatic agenda. Abdelatty's speech appeared calibrated to refocus that attention, reminding the world that despite temporary pauses in fighting, Gaza remains on the brink of a broader humanitarian and political collapse. Egypt fears that without sustained and structured international involvement, the crisis could escalate into a scenario that fundamentally reshapes the region. As he delivered his message, Abdelatty was also responding to Israeli claims that Palestinian factions are responsible for ceasefire violations. The minister argued that without independent verification, such claims risk becoming political tools that prolong the conflict rather than resolve it. By calling for international monitors along the yellow line, he is effectively challenging both sides to accept transparency. The implication is clear. If all parties agree to impartial monitoring, then those who violate the ceasefire will be exposed and diplomatic pressure can be applied accordingly. In Cairo's view, this kind of verification is essential not only to stabilize the ceasefire, but to rebuild any semblance of trust. Egypt believes that a robust monitoring mechanism could serve as a buffer during negotiations on more sensitive issues, including prisoner exchanges, reconstruction arrangements, and eventual political governance of the Gaza Strip. The stabilisation force would thus become a cornerstone of the second phase of the peace deal. Beyond the political dimension, Abdelatty's message highlighted the profound human cost of the conflict. He reminded the forum that displacement is not an abstract policy concept, but a lived reality for millions of Palestinians who have endured decades of upheaval. By refusing to allow Rafah to become a gate for displacement, Egypt is positioning itself as a guardian of humanitarian principles and regional stability. Cairo fears that any mass movement of Palestinians into Sinai could become permanent, undermining efforts to achieve a two-state solution and reinforcing narratives of dispossession. International reaction to his speech varied. Some Western diplomats welcomed the call for monitors, noting that independent verification has been lacking in previous ceasefire arrangements. Others expressed caution, pointing to logistical and political challenges of deploying an international force in Gaza, especially without consensus from all parties. Nevertheless, Egypt's proposal has reopened discussions about the role of international actors in ceasefire oversight, a debate that has simmered beneath the surface for months. Abdelatty's remarks also serve another purpose, signalling to Israel that Egypt cannot and will not absorb the consequences of policy decisions taken unilaterally. Cairo's insistence that Palestinians must remain in their homeland is partly a reflection of domestic political realities. Egyptian society has long been sensitive to the idea of accepting refugee populations that result from conflicts not of Egypt's making. Successive Egyptian governments have maintained that any displacement from Gaza must be resisted, not facilitated. Abdelatty's speech reinforced this long-standing doctrine, making it clear that Egypt sees displacement not as a humanitarian solution, but as a political disaster. As the Doha Forum continued, analysts observed that Abdelatty's intervention came at a moment when diplomatic momentum appeared to be stalling. There is growing concern that the longer international actors wait to implement the second phase of the peace agreement, the harder it will become to enforce. The stabilisation force proposal could, in Egypt's view, serve as a catalyst to break deadlocks and create new incentives for compliance. It would also reassure civilians in Gaza that the international community has not abandoned them. The Egyptian Foreign Minister's appearance in Doha was a reminder of how central Egypt remains in efforts to stabilise Gaza. Despite criticism from various sides, Egypt has maintained its dual role, mediator and protector of its own national interests. Abdelatty's language was careful but pointed, aimed at both domestic and international audiences. His message combined diplomatic urgency with humanitarian concern, reflecting the complexity of Cairo's position. As he concluded his remarks, the broader implication was evident. Without decisive and coordinated international intervention, the situation in Gaza may deteriorate in ways that become irreversible. Egypt is warning that the cost of inaction could be far greater than the political challenges of deploying an oversight mechanism. The moment, as Abdelatty framed it, demands political courage and a willingness to prioritise stability over competing narratives. In the coming weeks, the international community will face a choice: respond to Egypt's call for immediate deployment of a stabilisation force, or allow the ceasefire to continue without oversight, risking further collapse. Abdelatty's speech reflects Cairo's belief that time is running out and that the decisions made now will shape the future of Gaza, Egypt's security and the region's broader trajectory.